So, Mike, I'll offer a little segue here and just say that AI is giving us new superpowers, which I think is in line with our breakout question. But thank you so much for inviting me here today. As he said, I'm from the Best Practices in Schizophrenia Treatment Center at NEOMED. Let's talk a little bit about AI today. Just briefly, these are my objectives. I want to convey a few basic concepts about artificial intelligence, just enough so that we can understand how it works, review some potential risks and ethical considerations that we need to think about. And I'll just start with a disclaimer. So, my goal today is to start a discussion. AI is a huge topic. Um, I decided to be pretty expansive as I reviewed the literature, and some of the sources I cite are not peer reviewed, but I cited them because they contain some interesting and useful ideas. And also, the technical information I provide is very brief and superficial. It's meant to give you a quick overview, not to be a comprehensive account. But what is artificial intelligence? AI is not new. Research in this area began in the 1950s when scientists at a conference in Dartmouth coined the term. And the basic idea really is this. Artificial intelligence involves computer systems that are designed to mimic human intelligence. Any program that can use information to make decisions without active human involvement is a form of AI. So, for example, a very rudimentary form of AI is your thermostat. Your thermostat detects the current temperature, compares that value to the value you set, and it adjusts the behavior of your HVAC system accordingly. But a more recent example might be, you might remember IBM's Watson on Jeopardy! That's an artificial intelligence system that was developed and it actually beat Ken Jennings, the big Jeopardy champ, back in 2011. So it just goes to show that AI has been in development for a long time. But AI has advanced substantially since it was first developed, and today's AI chatbots use large language models. LLMs are developed through machine learning, which involves computer systems that are designed to learn patterns from very large sets of data. They use sophisticated algorithms to detect these patterns from training data sets, and then they generate new data based on those patterns. Various weights and biases are calculated to allow the system to make better predictions. LLMs are built on what's called a neural network architecture. And basically, that's a design that was inspired by the neurons of the human brain. But essentially, the core idea here is that LLMs are giant statistical prediction machines. They make predictions about words using statistics. LLMs make these predictions by converting text into tokens. Tokens are words or parts of words. And through a process called tokenization, text is broken up into smaller pieces that LLMs can understand and work with. There's also a post-training procedure called reinforcement learning from human feedback. And in this procedure, human reviewers score responses in an effort to refine the model. But even though humans are involved in post-training, embedding human values into LLMs is very hard. The ratings are essentially thumbs up and thumbs down ratings, sort of like the reactions that you see on social media platforms. They're very crude proxies for human values. They don't really capture the complexity of human thinking. And when engineers try to embed human values in the model but fail, they call this a proxy failure, basically a values misalignment. Human language is very complex and nuanced, and it's not possible to predict all of the things a person might prompt a chatbot to evaluate. As a result, AI systems can't completely guarantee safe output. Often, only the most obviously harmful outputs can be detected and corrected, but human language has a lot of subtleties that are difficult for LLMs to catch. So how does this apply to our work? Well, ethical standards that relate directly to AI are still emerging, but there are ethical standards that pertain to technology more generally. And one example here is the American Counseling Association standards that invite counselors to understand and become knowledgeable about technological resources. And since AI systems are being developed and deployed in a large variety of settings, I think we need to know just enough about how they work so that we can address it in our work. Also, the American Psychological Association published some guidance on the use of AI systems, and you can review that in the link on this slide if you go to iEcho. There's a wide variety of ways that AI systems are being used in healthcare. Some of these use cases include clinician training and role playing, drafting clinical documentation, writing intervention manuals, and providing feedback to professionals on their interactions with people. So, for example, one randomized controlled trial used LLMs to provide peer supporters with feedback on their use of empathic statements. And this trial showed positive results with increasing empathic responses in those peer supporters. So I think this does show that there's a targeted use of AI in behavioral health, but a more controversial application involves delivering mental health services to people with LLMs acting as therapists. I will say something interesting here. So, in one survey, up to 25% of US adults reported that they've used LLMs for psychological support and they had favorable views. Just something to think about. But there are some limitations and risks that we need to be aware of. And first, it's important to know that our understanding of how AI systems work is still emerging. Also, AI systems can produce information that's inaccurate or misleading. And this is in part because LLMs only produce information from the data that were used to train it. Most accurate and updated sources of information might not have been used in the pre-training. Also, it's just important to think about the fact that LLMs make statistical predictions about words, not definitive value judgments about the quality of the information that it's processing. A related issue involves the impact AI systems have on people who have psychosis. And so one thing we know is that new technologies are often incorporated into the delusional belief systems that people with psychosis develop. This is not really a new thing. But the primary difference here involves how AI systems are interactive. The responses AI chatbots provide feel personal and influential. They also tend to be excessively agreeable and may unintentionally collude with people who have delusions. Two other important risks involve the potential for algorithmic bias and belief amplification. So when algorithms recommend content that's consistent with the person's beliefs, it reduces that person's exposure to alternative points of view. And as a result, beliefs can be amplified by a feedback loop where a person and an AI system mutually reinforce each other. So the risk here is that an echo chamber of one can develop. A person's belief can be validated in an uncritical way through an iterative process. It's also important to know that the output produced by AI chatbots can collude with delusional beliefs. They tend not to challenge false claims and can produce false information. So for example, AI chatbots might miss nuanced indicators of suicidal ideation, and they can unintentionally provide details on how to engage in suicidal actions in response to prompts that lead them in that direction. Many people use AI chatbots to ask health-related questions, and when they're used in this way, AI functions as a sort of informal medical triaging system. There is some evidence that LLMs have difficulty triaging suicide risk. And so one study tested the triaging capabilities of ChatGPT Health, a variant of ChatGPT designed specifically for healthcare questions. And researchers discovered that the model provided inconsistent responses to suicidal ideation. Specifically, it showed that the model failed to provide crisis intervention warnings to prompts that contained objective medical findings like laboratory test results, but it did show crisis warning when that data was removed. Another risk involves cognitive offloading. This happens anytime we externalize a cognitive process to reduce the load on our working memory. People offload cognitive tasks all the time, and they did so even prior to the widespread adoption of AI. They just did so in smaller ways. So for example, if you use a calculator, you're offloading your need for your brain to do mathematical calculations. The benefits are pretty obvious. We become more productive and efficient, but there is a significant risk here. The use of AI is strongly associated with diminished critical thinking skills, and this is mediated by cognitive offloading. And this presents a dilemma. So using these tools can enhance our efficiency, but it diminishes our ability to think. And for therapists, I think one thing to think about is how the use of AI tools might impact our ability to engage in case conceptualization. Case conceptualization is a high-level skill therapists use to understand a person and their life experiences. And it's through this process that we take the core components of a theory like CBT, synthesize it with what we learn about a person, and develop interventions to help that person. The ability to think critically and reflect is a critical part of this process. But the more therapists use AI to synthesize session material, the more we might be diminishing our ability to conceptualize the cases that we work with. AI also has implications for our focus and concentration. Using AI impacts how we remember things by reducing the need to retain information. So previous research has called this transactive memory, or some people call it the Google effect. Essentially what that is when people tend to remember where to find information rather than the information itself. It can also fragment our attention, which might lead to superficial information processing. Has anybody seen this movie? I rewatched it the other day. It's Her, directed by Spike Jonze, and it was a little bit ahead of its time back in 2013. But another real risk here is that of anthropomorphic projection, basically projecting human characteristics onto AI systems. AI chatbots produce text that feels like the system understands and cares about them. But it's important for people to remember that these human characteristics are simulated in AI systems. You are not interacting with a person. You are interacting with code that has become a sort of social surrogate. And this has implications for how we form attachments. People with insecure attachment styles might feel drawn to the predictable and low demand nature of AI interactions, but this can also dampen a person's ability to tolerate the complexity and vulnerability that are part of all human relationships. The real risk here is that people will increasingly replace meaningful relationships with pseudo relationships that feel genuine but aren't. And so, how do we mitigate risks? There's a couple of strategies we can use. First, it's a good idea to review anything produced by an AI system to make sure that it doesn't contain harmful output. It's called putting a human in the loop. From a user's perspective, it's important to learn how to write effective prompts. Prompts are the instructions that people type into the chat in order to prompt the AI to generate a response. And then for mental health professionals, we should incorporate some way of identifying patterns of use in people who receive our services. So developing effective prompts improves model performance. This is called prompt engineering in the tech world, and there's 4 steps for writing effective prompts. First, describe a clear task or goal. Second, describe the input data that should be used. What resources do you want the model to use when generating a response? Third, give some background information. What situations should the prompt apply to whom, and so forth. And then finally, identify the prompt style. That is, provide instructions on the way the response should sound. What perspective should the model take? Should the model assume the position of a friend, a therapist, somebody else? For therapists or other mental health providers, here are some examples of some assessment questions that you might ask to determine what AI-related vulnerabilities people have. They assess things like the frequency of use, the purpose of use, consequences of use. Really, the primary goal here is just to ask any question that helps you get a sense of the level or nature of interactions between a person and an AI system. Now, just to keep things objective and fair, I'll also think a little bit about potential benefits of using LLMs, and I'm being speculative here, but the possibilities are still worth considering. So first, the low-hanging fruit. AI systems might be able to provide some low-level psychological support. Many people lack access to professional mental health services, but there may be some use cases where people who are struggling might be able to use AI to think through common mental health challenges. For people with psychosis, an intriguing possibility might include opportunities to have their experiences normalized, chances to practice social skills, support with reality testing, or chances to disrupt or distract from the voice hearing experience. Again, these are all speculative, and I think it's just important to think about this, given the fact that AI systems are going to be part of our lives for the foreseeable future, how we might leverage these systems for good uses. Are there any questions?